The rain hammered Seattle's cracked pavement like bullets against armor. Detective Nora Blackwood pulled her coat tighter as she stepped out of her sedan, the crime scene tape fluttering in the wind like funeral ribbons. The warehouse district reeked of salt water and decay. But tonight there was something else in the air, something that made her stomach clench with recognition. "What do we have, Rodriguez?" she called to the young officer securing the perimeter. "Victim's name is Victor Kane, 45, businessman. Single gunshot to the head, execution style." Rodriguez handed her the preliminary report, his hands shaking slightly. "Detective Blackwood, there's something else. Something weird." Nora had been with Seattle PD for 12 years, long enough to know that weird usually meant trouble. She ducked under the yellow tape and entered the abandoned warehouse, her boots echoing against concrete stained with years of neglect and tonight's fresh horror. Victor Kane lay sprawled beside a stack of wooden crates, his expensive suit doing nothing to dignify his death. But what stopped Nora's breath wasn't the corpse, it was what lay beside it. A single red rose petal, perfect and unblemished, placed carefully on the victim's chest like a lover's goodbye kiss. "The florist," she whispered. This was the fourth victim in 2 months. Each crime scene identical. Single gunshot, no witnesses, and always a flower petal left behind. The first victim had received a lily petal, the second a tulip, the third a daffodil. Now a rose. The media had dubbed him the florist, turning murder into headline poetry. Nora knelt beside the body, careful not to disturb the evidence. Kane's eyes stared at nothing, but his face held an expression she'd seen before on the other victims. Not surprise, but recognition, as if he'd known his killer. As if he'd been expecting this moment. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "He sold weapons to children's killers. The rose means love and death. Some people deserve both. A friend." Nora's blood turned cold. The florist had never communicated before, never explained his choices. Why was he reaching out to her? She looked around the warehouse, noting details the preliminary team had missed. Scuff marks near the door suggested Kane hadn't been alone when he arrived. Security cameras hung broken and useless. Fresh tire tracks outside indicated a quick getaway, but also something else. The killer had waited, watched, planned. "Rodriguez," she called, "run a full background on Kane. I want to know every business deal, every enemy, every dirty secret. You think this is personal?" Nora stared at the rose petal, its crimson surface reflecting the harsh crime scene lights. "They're all personal. We just haven't figured out why yet." As she turned to leave, another text arrived. "Meet me at Pier 47 tomorrow at midnight if you want the truth about your father's death. Come alone, Detective Blackwood. Some flowers bloom only in darkness." Her father had died 3 years ago in what the department called a tragic accident. But Nora had always wondered about the timing, the circumstances, the way the investigation had been quietly closed. Now someone claiming to be a killer was offering answers. The woman stared at Darren's outstretched hand for a long moment, as if it were some alien artifact she couldn't comprehend. Slowly, without taking his hand, she rose to her feet. Her movements were careful, deliberate, the cautious grace of someone who'd learned to expect rejection at every turn. She followed him through the winding corridors of the mid-level residential sector, keeping several paces behind. Darren could hear her bare feet padding softly against the metal grating, but she made no other sound. When they reached his modest quarters, he keyed in the access code and gestured for her to enter first. His apartment was simple but clean. A sleeping alcove, a small food preparation area, and most importantly, a private sanitation unit. She stood just inside the doorway, taking in the space with those oceanic eyes, as if trying to memorize every detail of what a real home looked like. "The shower's through there," Darren said, pointing toward the sanitation unit. There are clean towels on the shelf, and I'll find you something to wear." He paused, watching her carefully. "Take as long as you need." She moved toward the shower with hesitant steps, then stopped at the threshold. For the first time since he'd found her, she spoke. "Why?" Her voice was soft but clear, with a slight accent he couldn't place. "Why are you doing this?" Darren considered the question seriously. "Because everyone deserves basic dignity," he said finally. "And because you're still a person, no matter what anyone else thinks." Something flickered across her face, surprise, perhaps, or the faint stirring of hope she'd thought was dead. Without another word, she disappeared into the sanitation unit. The sound of running water filled the apartment for nearly an hour. Darren busied himself preparing a simple meal and laying out one of his clean work shirts and a pair of soft pants that might fit her smaller frame. He tried not to think about what she might look like beneath all that grime and damage. When the water finally stopped, he waited. Minutes passed before the door opened, and when she emerged, Darren's breath caught in his throat. The transformation was startling. Clean, her skin revealed its true color, a luminous pale blue that seemed to shimmer in the apartment's soft lighting. The silver markings along her jaw and temples were intricate, beautiful patterns that spoke of genetic artistry. Her dark hair, now clean and damp, fell in gentle waves to her shoulders, but it was more than her physical beauty that struck him. It was the way she held herself, straighter now, with a dignity that no amount of contamination could truly destroy. She wore his shirt, which hung loosely on her slender frame, and the pants he'd provided. Her feet were still bare, and she clutched the towel in her hands as if it were a lifeline. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Darren gestured toward the small table where he'd set the meal. "You should eat something," as she sat, and began to eat with careful, measured bites. He found himself studying her face. There was intelligence there, education. This wasn't someone who'd grown up on the streets. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She looked up from her food, those deep blue eyes meeting his. "Naya," she said. "Naya Veltar." "Well, Naya," Darren said, settling into the chair across from her. "You're safe here, for as long as you need. Part 3. Healing Waters. 3 days had passed since Darren brought Naya home, and the rhythm of their coexistence was beginning to feel natural. She'd taken to helping him organize his reports and maintaining his equipment, small gestures that spoke of her need to contribute rather than simply take. "I was a biochemical researcher," she said one evening as they shared a meal. It was the first time she'd volunteered information about her past. "I specialized in atmospheric processors for terraforming projects." Darren looked up from his food, encouraging her to continue with his silence. "There was an accident at the lab," Naya continued, her fingers absently tracing the silver patterns on her jaw. "A containment breach in the molecular synthesis chamber. I was the only one in the room when it happened." Her voice grew quieter. "The chemical exposure altered my pheromone production, made me repulsive to others." "You're not repulsive," Darren said firmly. "Not to me." Their eyes met across the small table, and something electric passed between them. Naya's breath caught slightly, and she looked away, color rising in her pale blue cheeks. "The company terminated my contract," she continued, but her voice had changed, become softer. "Said I was a workplace hazard. My housing allowance was revoked. My friends, they couldn't stand to be near me anymore." Darren reached across the table, his fingers barely brushing hers. She didn't pull away. "How long were you on the streets?" 8 months, she whispered. 8 months of people crossing walkways to avoid me, of being refused service, of sleeping in drainage tunnels because even the homeless shelters wouldn't take me." The raw pain in her voice made Darren's chest tighten. Without thinking, he stood and moved to her side of the table, kneeling beside her chair. Naya, he said softly, turning her face toward his with gentle fingers. Look at me. She met his gaze, and he could see the walls she'd built around her heart beginning to crack. You matter, he said, his voice intense with conviction. You're brilliant. You're beautiful. And you deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. Tears gathered in her oceanic eyes. I haven't felt human in so long, she whispered. You are human, Darren said, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. More human than most people I know. The space between them seemed to shimmer with possibility. Slowly, carefully, Darren leaned closer. Naya's eyes fluttered closed as his lips met hers, in a kiss so gentle it felt like a prayer. When they broke apart, both were breathing unsteadily. I'm scared, Naya admitted, her forehead resting against his. Of what? That this is temporary, that you'll realize what everyone else did, that I'm damaged goods. Darren cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. Then let me prove you wrong, he said. Let me show you every day that you're worthy of love. That night, for the first time since he'd brought her home, Naya didn't sleep on the small couch. She curled up beside Darren in his bed, her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat as he stroked her hair until she fell into the deepest, most peaceful sleep she'd known in months. Part 4. Heart's awakening. Naya woke to the sensation of sunlight, artificial though it was, streaming through the apartment's single window. For a moment she was disoriented, unused to waking up warm and safe. Then she became aware of the arm wrapped protectively around her waist and the steady breathing of the man beside her. Darren was still asleep, his face relaxed and peaceful. In sleep, he looked younger, less burdened by the weight of a job that required him to witness society's failures every day. Naya studied his features, the strong jaw, the slight stubble, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead. She'd been so focused on survival for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to want someone, to feel desire stirring in her, chest like a warm tide. But looking at him now, feeling the solid warmth of his body against hers, she remembered what it meant to be alive rather than merely existing. Darren's eyes opened slowly, immediately focusing on her face. Good morning, he said, his voice rough with sleep. Good morning, she replied, suddenly self-conscious. I hope it was okay that I... It was more than okay, he interrupted, his hand moving to brush a strand of hair from her face. I slept. Better than I have in years. The intimacy of the moment, lying together in the soft morning light, speaking in whispers, felt more precious than anything Naya had experienced in her former life. Before the accident, relationships had been casual, convenient. This felt like something altogether different. Darren, she began hesitantly, I need you to know something. The contamination. It doesn't just affect my scent. It affects other things, too. He propped himself up on his elbow, giving her his full attention. The doctor said it might have altered my neurochemistry as well, made me hypersensitive to touch, to emotional stimuli. They warned me that intimate relationships might be complicated. Darren's expression grew serious. Complicated how? Naya's cheeks flushed deeper blue. More intense, overwhelming potentially. They said I might experience physical sensations and emotions more acutely than before. Instead of pulling away, Darren moved closer, his face inches from hers. Then we'll take things slowly, he said. We'll figure it out together. His understanding, his willingness to accept every part of her, even the parts she wasn't sure about, herself, broke something open in her chest. She kissed him then, deeper than the night before, pouring months of loneliness and gratitude into the connection between them. The kiss awakened something in both of them. Darren's hands tangled in her hair as Naya pressed closer, her enhanced sensitivity making every touch feel like lightning across her skin. When his lips moved to her neck, she gasped at the intensity of sensation. Too much, he whispered against her skin. No, she breathed. Perfect. They moved together with careful reverence, mapping each other's bodies with gentle hands and soft kisses. Naya's contamination had indeed changed her. Every caress sent cascades of sensation through her nervous system. Every whispered endearment felt like music in her altered brain chemistry. 2 weeks later, Naya stood in front of the mirror in Darren's apartment, their apartment now, and barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Regular meals had filled out her gaunt cheeks, and her skin had regained its natural luminescence. But more than the physical changes, there was something in her eyes that had been missing for months. Hope. "The medical board agreed to see you," Darren announced as he entered the room holding a data pad. "Dr. Voss thinks there might be treatments available for your condition." Naya turned from the mirror, her heart racing. Treatments? Enzyme, therapy, neural pathway restructuring. Apparently contamination cases like yours aren't as hopeless as the company doctors made them seem. He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "But even if nothing works, even if you never go back to normal, it doesn't change anything between us." She looked up at him, still sometimes amazed by his unwavering acceptance. "How did I get so lucky?" "I'm the lucky one," he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You've made me remember what it means to live instead of just exist." Their quiet moment was interrupted by a soft chime from the door. Naya tensed. Visitors were rare, and her instinctive fear of rejection hadn't fully faded. "It's probably just Tomas," Darren assured her, referring to his neighbor who occasionally borrowed equipment. "He's harmless." But when the door opened, it wasn't Tomas standing in the hallway. It was a woman in a crisp medical uniform, flanked by 2 colony officials. "Naya Veltar?" the woman asked. "I'm Dr. Voss. We've been looking for you." Naya stepped back instinctively, but Darren moved protectively to her side. "It's all right," Dr. Voss said quickly, noting Naya's fear. "We're here with good news. The investigation into the lab accident has been completed. The company has been found negligent in multiple safety protocols. There's a substantial settlement waiting for you, and more importantly, we've developed a treatment protocol specifically for your type of contamination." Naya's legs felt weak. "A treatment?" 93% success rate, Dr. Voss confirmed. "The procedure would reverse most of the chemical alterations to your system. You could return to your research career if you wanted." The room spun, slightly. Everything she'd thought was lost forever might be within reach. But as she looked at Darren, she realized something profound. She wasn't the same person who'd lost that life months ago. Suffering had taught her things about compassion, resilience, and love that no laboratory could have shown her. "What about the hypersensitivity?" she asked. "The enhanced neurochemistry?" "That would likely return to baseline as well," Dr. Voss replied. Naya felt Darren's hand squeeze hers. She knew he would support whatever decision she made, even if it meant losing the intense connection they'd discovered together. "I need to think about it," Naya said finally. After the officials left, promising to return in a few days for her answer, Naya sat on their bed, staring out the window at the city that had first rejected her and was now offering her redemption. "You should do it," Darren said quietly from the doorway. "Should I?" she asked without turning around. "You deserve to have choices, to reclaim your career, your old life, if that's what you want." Naya stood and walked to him, taking his face in her hands. "My old life didn't have you in it," she said. "Besides, I've learned something these past months. Sometimes what seems like an ending is really just a different kind of beginning." She kissed him then, pouring all her certainty into the connection between them. "I'll take the treatment," she decided. Not to go back to who I was, but to move forward as who I've become. With you. Outside their window, the artificial sun set over Colony Nexus 7, painting the sky in shades of hope. In the Undercity where they'd found each other, new stories were beginning, written by those brave enough to see light in the darkness. And in their small apartment, two souls who'd found each other in the deepest places of human suffering began to plan a future that neither contamination nor cruelty could destroy.